Terrific. Welcome everyone to the APIC webinar and the postdoctoral application and selection process. The APIC Postdoctoral Committee is excited to provide you with information about the application and selection process that is designed to be helpful for applicants, postdoc training directors, and internship training directors providing mentorship. My name is Dr. Patricia Daza. I'm at the Menninger Clinic here in Houston, Director of Psychology and Clinical Training, and I'll be serving as the moderator for this webinar. Just for your information, the webinar will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be available on the APIC Postdoc webpage in a couple of days. Also, on the APIC Postdoc webpage, you can find a video about postdoc selection. So our discussants today are Dr. Wayne Siegel. He is currently the chair of the APIC Postdoc Committee. Previously was at the Minneapolis VA as director of training and currently in private practice and also offers some consulting. We also have Dr. Heather Smith. She's a psychologist that is board certified in geropsychology, lead psychologist and director of psychology training at the VA Medical Center in Milwaukee, and professor and associate vice chair for faculty development in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the Medical College of Wisconsin. For the first half of the webinar, Dr. Siegel and Smith will briefly address key aspects of the postdoc selection process, as well as talk about the selection standards. And for the second half of the webinar, they're going to answer any question posed by you all. You can type in any questions in the chat function at any point in the webinar. We'll get to those at the end of the presentation. So I'll leave that up to you all now.
Great. Thanks so much for that introduction, Dr. Daza, and thank you all attendees for being here today. You know, we offer a seminar on applying to postdoctoral fellowships in my training program for the interns at our site. And I know that that's usually something that's very valued and we get positive feedback about it. And I know that the modal emotional response to having that seminar or anticipating that seminar is anxiety. So I want to start us off by having us all just pause for a moment and take a nice, slow, deep breath in. And exhale that out. And in general, recognize that this is an opportunity to take a deep breath in a situation where anxiety may be heightened for all of you. But really the goal of this webinar is to provide you all with some education and some background on the postdoctoral training process and on the selection timeline from start to finish. The process for applying to postdocs is very different than applying for internship, and it's often less stressful. You survived internship selection, and our goal is for you to leave today with some tools to be successful in applying for and securing a postdoctoral fellowship of your choosing. So we're going to start off with an overview of postdoctoral training broadly, and really point out a few different ways in which postdoc is different than internship. So first of all, internship is a required component if you want to earn your doctoral degree, whereas postdoctoral training is really not required for your degree. And in many states, at last count, approximately 17 of them, it's not required for licensure either. So essentially, formal postdoctoral training is really not required anywhere. Also, unlike internship, there's no match or uniform selection process for postdoc. However, APIC and the APIC Postdoc Committee has been working to organize application and selection processes for many years now, and we're going to talk about that process in a little bit more detail later. But we've developed postdoctoral selection standards and a common hold date. The standards are voluntary, but will guide postdoctoral selection and recruitment for many programs and trainees. Another way that internship and fellowship are different is with respect to neuropsychology. So for neuropsychology, there is a national match system for postdoc that's sponsored by the Association of Postdoctoral Programs in Clinical Neuropsychology, or APPCN, but not all programs participate in that match. And many of the programs that do not participate may make earlier offers than the match date for APPCN participating programs. So if you're considering neuropsychology programs, make sure you're understanding whether or not each program participates in the match, and if not, what their timeline is for regarding interviews and offers. I'm actually thinking that perhaps we're not matched up on our slides here, so I'm going to make sure that I'm following what you have up on the screen
No,
the
no,
way.
no. I will adjust accordingly. So
Okay,
I lost track.
that's
Um,
okay.
where are we? What number?
5.
Okay, there we go. I
So
will.
just to kind of summarize a couple of other ways in which postdoc is different from internship. So, you know, a lot of times we hear about with internship, APA accreditation, APIC membership, and at the postdoc level, you'll note that most training opportunities are actually not APA accredited or are not APIC members. So that means that these are programs that have not undergone external review, which may ultimately be completely okay for a postdoctoral position. There are a lot of excellent training opportunities at the postdoc level that are not APA accredited or are not APIC members. Yet it's really important as applicants that you evaluate what's the right fit for you to ensure that your training goals are met and to ensure that the program is of quality, that the fellows there are treated fairly and with respect. So we've got an article listed here on this slide by Dr. Silberbogen and colleagues that points out some of the factors to consider when deciding whether or not a postdoc position versus a more formal postdoc training program might be the best fit for you. Finally, I want to point out a really important way in which postdoc is different than internship, and this is good news for all of you as applicants, and that is there's a significant imbalance between that favors you as applicants. There's way more available postdoc positions than there are applicants to fill them. So it's truly a buyer's market for you as applicants. Go ahead to the next slide. So this really begs the question of what's the purpose of postdoc training if APA says you can get your license following internship and it's really not truly required in many contexts. While the purpose of postdoc training and kind of how we've recognized it within the field has varied over time, in general, the consensus is that whereas internship is considered broad in general, postdoc fellowship training is advanced or specialized training within a focus or specialty practice area. It may be required actually to market yourself for a particular type of position or within a particular specialty. It also provides an opportunity for professional growth and development and access to experiences that might be novel or that you may have had less exposure to as an intern or practicum student, such as providing supervision, engaging in program administration, development, or evaluation. Next slide. So there's a variety of different post-internship experiences that are available to you. There are APIC and APA accredited programs, and with those more formally recognized programs tend to guarantee that it's going to be a training year rather than a work productivity focused year. A training year meaning it includes didactics, clinical hours, supervision, and trainee centric perspectives. These APA accredited and APIC member programs are generally clinically focused with up to 50% research, although the majority likely have closer to 10 to 20% research time included. And these may also be non-APA accredited or non-APIC member programs, which can be equally programmatic or can have more variability in terms of whether or not they really are training versus employment focused. There's also a wide range of research-focused postdoc positions, which, along with the focus on research, also may allow for clinical hour accrual for the purposes of licensure. You might find research-focused positions funded through NIH T32 or F awards, or through the advanced fellowships offered through the VA, which often have up to 75% research focus, or perhaps finding a position as a project manager in some capacity on a funded research project. Next slide. So how do you know if you need to pursue a postdoc? Well, I think it's important for you to ask yourself several questions. This might not be an exhaustive list, but some important ones include whether or not you're pursuing a career that requires formal specialty training. So in areas, recognized specialty areas like neuropsychology, geropsychology, health psychology, rehab psych, among others. It's recommended that you become familiar with the education and training standards for your specialty area of interest, as well as the requirements to become board certified in that specialty, should that be your goal someday. Trainees who are interested in launching a research career typically complete a postdoc fellowship to develop more focused research competencies, such as in manuscript development and grant writing. Fellowships may increase your competitiveness for academic positions. They provide more focused time for developing lines of independent research. And we'll talk a bit more about considerations for research positions in a minute. Ideally, postdoc programs that are providing that specialized and advanced training will help with your competitiveness to secure jobs in those areas. With the exception of recognized specialty areas, completing a postdoc may be an advantage, although maybe not absolutely critical for some career paths. So seek guidance and mentorship from individuals working in career areas of potential interest so that you can make the best choice for you. So as we've said, neither APA accredited or APIC member postdoc fellowships are required for licensure. However, external review of a program by APA and or APIC may confer some confidence about the site and the training that you received. And in some jurisdictions, the licensure application process can be faster, easier, more certain to be successful if you've completed an APA accredited and or APIC member internship and postdoc. Also, it's important to think about if you choose not to do a postdoc, but then move to a state that requires one for licensure later on, you may find yourself doing a postdoc later in life. Next slide. So just to kind of recap, some of the benefits of pursuing a postdoc and a more formal training program include some guarantees around things like direct supervised clinical hours, the receipt of adequate supervision, ensuring that you are engaged in training within experiences that map onto your professional competencies and desired specialty activities. You have the benefit of a peer cohort for socialization and support, access to mentors, professional development, and leadership opportunities in your areas of interest, and networking opportunities. Also, pursuing a more formal postdoc tends to support, pursuit of ABAP board certification when the time comes, as well as increased mobility for licensure. And this is not to say that a more informal training position couldn't provide these things. There may be opportunity to negotiate those pieces in, but within a more formal program, that guarantee that those things will be there is pretty high. I mentioned we would talk a little bit more about research-focused positions, so we'll go on to that. Many training directors of research-focused fellowships are familiar with the idea that, even those pursuing research careers may wish to become licensed. And so they're familiar with answering questions about the ability to get hours for licensure during a research-focused postdoc. So as long as you make it clear that your main interest is in the research training that the postdoc is offering, asking about how others who have completed the program have obtained those hours for licensure is completely acceptable and reasonable. It may be more difficult to find out about research postdocs and which ones are available because they're so often based on grant funding. NIH Reporter is a great resource for identifying postdoc options in your research area. Once you identify the principal investigators of researchers in your areas, you can reach out to them by email. You can send them your CV and make connections about your potential competitiveness for those positions that way. Speaking of competitiveness, how do you ensure that you are competitive for a research postdoc? I think it's very important to make sure that your research interests are clear in your communications and that you have a CV that reflects some publications in that particular area. It's not necessary, but it can be impressive if you've been able to obtain funding for yourself, such as through a small pilot project or foundation grant, or via a travel award to conferences in your specialty area. The fit between your research interests and experiences and those of your potential research mentor on postdoc is particularly important in terms of competitiveness for these positions. Finally, I'll just touch upon options for international students. There are opportunities for international students, although not all programs and institutions will be available to international students. So it's really important to review program materials and to make contact with the training director if it's unclear whether or not an international student could be considered. There are also postdoctoral experiences that exist internationally, such as in Canada or the UK. These are not listed in our universal postdoc directory on the APIC website, although this could change as we're constantly adding programs as they become available. And we're also not aware of any other directories that exist for international postdocs in psychology, but certainly if we do become aware of those, we will share those resources. And speaking of resources, I will turn it over to Wayne to
Yes.
provide
And to
an overview.
add, Heather, I'm sorry about the slide confusion, but also want to add with international postdocs, I had just updated the slide this morning, is there's a new field in the UPPD where programs can indicate if they accept international students, and then you can search on that field if you are an international student and you're interested. And then so then we're going to talk about shift directions and talk about resources a little bit. And so if people have not found it already, strongly recommend you visit the postdoctoral page on the APIC website. The link is at the very top of the APIC site. And if you just click on postdoc, a bunch of menus with some of these other links will pop up, but it will bring you to the postdoc page, and then you can kind of just filter through and find these different things. And I'm going to talk about these things kind of briefly. We've mentioned the UPPD, the Universal Psychology Postdoctoral Directory. This was a resource that was born out of the 2016 Postdoctoral Summit that APEC sponsored in combination with APA, and included many stakeholders in postdoctoral training. And we tried to provide, the goal was to provide some organization to the postdoctoral selection process. And the first thing identified is there was not a universal place where people could go to search for that. So the UPPD was built and has been, it's not perfect, it has been wildly successful. There's about 1,900 listings of programs in there. Now, not all postdoctoral programs are in there. Some people may choose not to list. So it's not like internship where the APIC directory has the universe of internships that you would be applying to. So encourage you, go, this is a great resource. If there is a subset of programs that may be less represented in the UPPD, that might be research programs that are predominantly or all research kind of focused, is sometimes they don't see the need to list into the UPPD. There's also links to the selection standards, which we're going to go through in a fair amount of detail. And these are recommendations. Programs can opt into them. They're not mandatory. Again, very different than internship in that there aren't these like clear rules where there are consequences for violating the rules. It's more kind of on an honor system. And the vast majority of programs and applicants follow these rules and things work out fine. We also have communication templates, and these are hyperlinked into the standards. So for different parts of the standards where there may be involved communication between you as an applicant and the program, or the program and you as an applicant, these communication templates give you an idea of like what you can or should be communicating to the program. Again, there's suggestions. You can rewrite them in your own words, but highly recommend that you use them. They also kind of help with adherence and education about kind of the standards for both programs and applicants. Hopefully you have all signed up for APIC's postdoctoral news, that you've learned about this particular webinar was advertised there. If you have not, highly recommend that you set up. Moving forward, this will be the main source of information that you get kind of from APIC about postdoctoral selection. We have a postdoctoral selection PowerPoint, and there's a hyperlink off the APIC postdoctoral site under education resources. For this year, we broke this into 3 separate presentations so that you could kind of make it easier to find kind of aspects about postdoc that you're wanting. There was a question in the chat earlier about whether the slides would be available on the website, and the slides per se will not be. Recordings of this webinar will be available, but this presentation has everything that the slides have and more, and so I recommend that people kind of use those resources. And then we also have selection timelines that break timelines from an applicant to clinical, people applying to clinical programs, people applying to neuropsych programs, people applying to neuropsych programs, and then there's also timelines from the programs in terms of what do you need to do at what time of the year. One of the stressful things about this process is there's less structure to that. And as Heather noted, that can be a very good thing, but that can also be anxiety provoking. My recommendation is that you take what's in front of you right now. Don't think 2, 3, 4 months down the road in terms of what you want to do. And so now you're searching for programs and trying to identify programs that you're interested in. And the timeline will help guide you about like, okay, now is when I not just start to think about the next process. So you don't have to kind of wonder, like, am I missing something or not doing something that I should do? And then we've also developed, a spreadsheet that is a template with lots of variables that we think are really useful for you to track programs you're interested in. Again, because there is no formal match, all programs may require different materials in terms of their postdoctoral and in terms of accepting your application, and they may have different timelines as well also. And so this spreadsheet can help you kind of track that information in terms of what is due where, and can help you kind of narrow down this process of which are maybe your top programs, which are middle tier, and which ones are lower tier or that you're not interested in. So a little bit more about the UPPD. This is just a screenshot of the search functions of the UPPD. And you can you can free text, you can select these different quality indicators, different agency type, location, following the standards, etc. So it's fairly straightforward. And then last year we added these elements of quality training. And the goal behind us adding this was to make applicants mostly, but programs as well, aware of quality. So as Heather mentioned earlier, APA accredited programs, APIC member programs have some type of external review. There's some quality assurance that this is a program that is focused on training. Because we don't vet listings in the UPPD, anybody that says they have a postdoctoral program can enter their information in there. There's lots of warnings that this hasn't gone under some type of external review. We ask programs to self-attest to these criteria. Again, they're self-attesting. We have no way of assuring whether this is actually accurate or not. Have to believe the vast majority of programs are being accurate and straightforward. But as an applicant, suggest that you pay attention to these as you're looking at programs, particularly programs that are not APIC member programs or APA accredited programs. Some of this I covered already. Yes, I did. So this is a screenshot of the selection standards and just the beginning part, just to kind of give you an idea of what that is. And recommend these are very detailed and long, and it's hard to digest. You don't have to memorize them. You should familiarize yourself with them. And as you look at these timelines, you should be aware of what aspects of the standards apply to where you are in the application process or this particular month or time frame. And again, here's a screenshot of the communication templates. And they're also kind of hyperlinked by section. And so you can, like, accepting a postdoc before the common hold date, accepting, holding it, what do you do? It can be really helpful in your communication with programs. We have found that applicants often maybe underestimate their ability to communicate and be direct with programs. And so this gives you an idea of like what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. If you still have questions, we'll talk about this later as well also. Mentorship and getting good guidance through the process, not just being educated like you are now about what the process is, but whether it's your internship director, a faculty member, another supervisor on internship that can really kind of help you walk through this. And then also the postdoc committee and myself, we're available if people have questions through that process. Here's an example of one of the timelines that I had noted. And so, you know, in September, here we are in October, it gives you a sense of what you should be thinking about at this point. A snapshot of the spreadsheet. I will say the spreadsheet is long. We included every variable that we thought could be relevant. You can use this as a template, and you can pare it down and tailor it to yourself. It's just an Excel file. So it's easily modifiable to what you think is useful. And then back to Heather.
All right, thank you. So we'll talk a bit about the application process itself. One really important thing to be thinking about is where you are at with progress towards completing your dissertation. Most clinical and research postdocs are not going to allow an all but an ABD or an all but dissertation student to begin postdoc. And licensing jurisdictions have regulations about postdoctoral hours and may not allow you to begin counting your postdoc hours until your degree is conferred because you're not yet postdoc. So really carefully consider your ability to make progress on your dissertation prior to starting a postdoc position. We don't have data on how many applications maximize the likelihood of obtaining a postdoc. However, we do know that the modal application number is around 8. So this can vary, you know, based on what type of postdocs you're applying to and your geographical restrictions or not. But you can see that this number is lower than the modal number for internship applications. So keep that in mind as well. In terms of timelines, you know, Wayne mentioned we have timeline documents on the website. Highly encourage you to look at those. In general, though, information about available postdocs starts to become available now, essentially. The UPPD listings are being updated or have been updated, a significant proportion of them at this point anyway. Deadlines for applications typically fall between December and January. They tend to be more variable for research versus clinical positions. And interviews then are occurring in January and early February. The APIC makes a strong recommendation to programs that they conduct only virtual interviews, although there will be variations on that. And it's really important just to clarify if it's not clear from the program materials. We can't emphasize enough how important it is to connect with current postdocs if you can during the interview process so that you can learn what it's truly like to experience a postdoc at that site. Next slide. So some considerations to think about if you're applying to different types of fellowship positions, clinical research, or more just a postdoc position that's more a job. You know, we've already kind of made this point a couple of times, but it's challenging. It's potentially challenging because timelines may not be consistent. And often where we see that challenge the most is with programs, maybe more research-oriented programs or job-like positions, making very early offers and not allowing applicants to hold offers until the common hold date. So I think we emphasize to you to be open and honest with programs about the time frames that you are working with among the programs to which you've applied as you go through the process. We also, as to Wayne's point, we really encourage you to seek out mentorship, talk with your graduate and internship mentors to support and advise you throughout the process. Ask them to review your materials if they're willing to do that and provide you feedback on your application materials. We always recommend clear and transparent communication with all parties involved throughout this process, and want to make a note of the fact that accepting a postdoc position and then later reneging on that for something else is generally considered to be unprofessional behavior among most parties in our profession. Next slide. So, more considerations to think about. Some programs have multiple tracks, and you may be interested in more than one track within a program, and that's totally okay. Definitely okay to apply to more than one track. Just need to make a strong argument for how you fit with each of the tracks to which you've applied. You might also keep in mind that you're probably going to be asked to rank your preferences among those tracks, so be thinking about that as you're going through the interview process as well. What about if you're applying to a position at your current internship site? Some tips to keep in mind regarding that is to, again, have open and honest and transparent communication. Talk to your training director about it. Talk to your clinical supervisors at your internship site about your intent to apply and about your interests. It's likely also potentially important to talk to your cohort, the other interns at your site. You're going to potentially be competing with them for spots, and that can be uncomfortable, especially if there aren't enough spots for the number of current interns that are interested in staying at that site. It's good to check in with your training director, your internship training director, about whether or not they have any preference for internal applicants for their postdoc positions. And if so, how does that affect kind of the time frame that they approach as they approach selection for their positions? It may or may not affect their time frame. They may still follow the common hold date process, or they may make early offers to internal candidates before they consider external candidates. Finally, if you're applying to positions within your current internship site, keep in mind that you may or may not be selected. You may not be selected, and therefore you will have to then spend the rest of your internship year with that perceived rejection, perhaps. So just being aware of that and have thoughts about how to potentially manage that if that comes to fruition. Next slide, application materials. So here's another place where internship and postdoc are different in that there's more variability in the application materials required for postdoc positions than there was for internship. But in general, most programs will require a CV, transcripts, a cover letter or statement of interest outlining your interests in their positions and your goodness of fit for those positions, and some number of letters of recommendation. Often, I guess the modal amount of those would be 3. And usually at least one of these is from internship, one of these is from your graduate program, and possibly one is from your dissertation advisor attesting to your progress towards completing the dissertation. The Apicas is the online application portal and format for postdoc positions. Not all programs use the Apicas, but it is free for both programs and applicants to use. And it's less detailed than the API, such that the consensus is that applying for postdocs tends to be easier and a bit less stressful than it is applying for internship. But given the variability in timelines, it can feel less organized and less uniform. All right, back to Wayne.
All right. I'm going to talk about the selection standards and common hold date, some of the kind of highlights of that, just to kind of make you aware of that. So some basic principles of the selection standards is programs can make offers anytime upon completing interviews. And the idea is in the past, sometimes people would have interviews scheduled and they would get an applicant that they really liked and they would make an offer, but people were back in the day when people were interviewing in person mostly, is people would have travel schedule and they would get notified that the position had been filled, and that doesn't work very well or to seem very fair. So as soon as interviews are done, offers can be made. Typically, that is mostly late January, early February, probably the bulk around that first week in February. Programs can extend as many offers as positions they have. Offers are considered binding and binding until 10 a.m. Eastern Time on the common hold date. This year it's February 23rd, 2026. Once you accept an offer, the program needs to immediately notify all their applicants. And this is a very important principle. So if you know, once they notify all of their applicants, and their applicants are then free to accept offers from maybe their number 2, 3, or 4 ranked program, etc. And then programs can periodically check in with applicants who are holding offers. So even though you can hold an offer until that common hold date, the program may reach out just for insurance, because they get nervous. Like, are you still out there? Are you still holding? Are you interested? But they're not supposed to pressure you to make an early decision. Okay. And then more for applicants is, as soon as you get an offer for a program, even if it's not one that you want to accept, you need to respond by email within 24 hours. Otherwise, that program can then make an offer to the next applicant. So even if you want to hold it, you need to let the program know that you have acknowledged that. It's very, very important to be able to do that, and realize that's a pain if you're on vacation or you're traveling, but we almost all have smartphones and stuff. So we should be able to make that work. Applicant can accept or decline an offer at any point. Applicants can only hold one offer at a time. This is critical. Until the common hold date, if you have an offer you're holding and then you get an offer from a higher ranked program, of course you would hold that new offer for a higher ranked program and immediately notify the program that you're holding, and then all other programs below that on your list. And again, this is this is very important, because it then frees up those programs to make offers to other applicants. So you're being kind to the program, but you're being most kind to your fellow applicants through this process. Similar to programs, applicants can check in with hiring programs about their status. If you're holding an offer from your second rank program and you're wondering about your first rank program, you can reach out to them. You can ask. They may not be able to tell you a whole lot. They may tell you, we've not gone through our process, we've not made offers yet, or we have an applicant holding it. Okay, and so this can be helpful in you making a decision. Sometimes it doesn't give you all the information that you want, but it can give you more information than you have to try and make a decision. And then when you accept an offer, similarly, withdraw from all lower ranked programs to kind of free up that process. The rationale for the selection standards. It allows for a much more flexible, fluid process that we believe mutually benefits program and applicant pairings. And there's less time pressure compared to a previous process where there was one date, uniform notification date, when all offers were made, and that worked well for a while, and then maybe it didn't work as well as it could have, and we've shifted to this process, which we think is a lot more flexible and adaptive for programs and applicants. This process allows for ongoing communication between applicants and programs. Through internship, you could communicate with programs, but never could you communicate any information about ranking preference, and particularly programs were prohibited from giving you any information about that. Those don't exist within postdoc, as you can communicate and you can ask. It allows applicants to make maximally informed decisions. There can be situations where maybe you don't have information about all your programs, particularly if you get an offer earlier than other programs that are prepared. But as a general rule, it gives you more information than other processes. And it is disrupting this, what I call annual creep of early offers, where they're going earlier and earlier every year, which doesn't really work for programs and for applicants, because here we are 3 months into internship, and you are now like dead smack in the middle of applying to postdocs when you're barely acclimated to internship. Um, and then overall, fostering organization to the postdoc selectional process. Um, so how do you know if a program is following the standards? There's a field in the UPPD listing where they're indicating the field not. If it's a program that is not listed in the UPPD, you can ask a program if they're following that. If a program doesn't know about the standards, um, um, you can kind of tell them about the program. You can tell them about the standards, point them in the direction. You could refer them to me, other members of the postdoc committee. And then how do you handle it if programs are not following the standards? Okay, know that they are not binding, they're not bound to let you hold an offer until the common hold date. So you could ask, when do you anticipate making offers? And again, they're not bound to that, but it's a fair question to ask. And at least if you have that information, you have a sense of where that's going to fall with the other programs that you're applying to. How do programs usually contact applicants to offer a position? I'd say the vast majority is done through email and maybe following up with a phone call. Some may start with a phone call. And so be relatively available through this selection process. And again, you can ask programs that you're applying to, even those that are following the standards, how will they be contacting you? And that's something specific that you could track. How long can you hold an offer? Okay, if it's a program following the standards, you can hold an offer until the 23rd of February, which is embedded in the standards. If it's not a program following the standards, ask them. Okay, they can say an hour, or some programs are willing to let you hold it for several days, a week, or until the common hold date. And they can set their own parameters around that. If you don't accept an offer right away, will the program view you negatively? Of course, programs that want you to say yes right away, but they understand this is an important process. They're not going to hold it against you. They really do kind of understand what this is like for you. Do the standards have a reciprocal offer process? No, there is no reciprocal offer. Under the prior selection guidelines and uniform notification date, there was a way that you could, if you got an early offer from a program not following the guidelines, you could go to your top ranked program and ask for a reciprocal offer. That does not exist, and that wouldn't work with this current system. Can I check in with programs where I've applied? Yes, reach out to programs. Again, you're checking out your status. Where do I fall? There's a communication template specifically for this, and I recommend that people at least look at it. If you're requesting a position, if you're requesting to hold a position, again, there's a communication template for that to help guide you through that process. And then you would immediately let lower ranked programs on your list know that you're holding a higher option. I know there's a tendency for applicants that get nervous and they want more options, but it really is considered unethical to be holding more than one offer at a time, despite your tendency to maybe want to. If you accept a position, immediately notify all lower ranked positions, and congratulations on accepting that position. What if you don't have a position on the common hold date? Could happen. I think there was a handful of positions last year and the year before. The vast majority of all offers and matches happen well before the actual common hold date. But take a deep breath. There are many good positions available. Heather had mentioned earlier, there's an imbalance. Postdoc selection, it is a buyer's market, and you are the buyer. Roughly, programs have about a 30% non-fill rate. And so there will be plenty of programs available on that communication hold date. We will ask, we make the UPPD available for programs to list unfilled positions after the common hold date, and then you can search for open positions. And many people do find positions that way. If a program does not allow you to hold an offer until the common hold date, if the program is saying that if they're not indicating that they're following the standards, there really is no recourse. This is the program's right. They can go ahead and do that. If they're putting pressure on you and they are um, 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 not allowing you to hold until the common hold date, it puts you in a very awkward position. I would get guidance, mentorship from internship director, faculty, or call me or one of the other members of the postdoctoral committee, and we can give you guidance. I am willing to call programs. I realize that puts applicants in an awkward position if that happens, but it does occur on occasion. I'm going to skip the brief demonstration of the UPPD unless we don't have questions, because I want to make sure that we have enough time for be able to do that. And then, most importantly, wish you the best of luck. And again, I want to reiterate my advice of take one step at a time. What's in front of you right now, the process and your preference for which programs is going to unfold naturally as you apply and learn more about them. And so it's more of a tolerance for that kind of not knowing everything right now, but it does unfold and people become more confident as the process goes on. So with that, I will turn it back over to Patty for
Yes, we have
questions.
one question. Well, there's others that I've answered, but we'll talk. While I understand this varies by program. Oh, wait, actually, let me do my concluding remarks first. Just this concludes our webinar. We're gonna do some questions and answers right now, but we just want to remind people that the webinar will be available, recording of the webinar, not the slides, just to correct myself, in a couple of days. A lot of the resources are available on the APIC website. Please, there's a lot of very useful information, but here's one question. While I understand this varies by program, what is the general approach to parental leave and postdocs? Do parents get time off and how does it work?
I can take a stab at that. That will vary greatly across programs and institutions. I am aware, and I don't know a lot about this. I think California has a law that says they have to give you the parental leave, even if it's an internship. But I don't believe there are any other states that actually require that. So it may vary. I would say many postdocs, similar to internship, don't have formal like paid parental, whether it's maternal or paternal leave. They will negotiate time off for you, and that seems unfair. But in a year or 2 year long training program to take off, you know, 9, 10, 12 or more weeks kind of interrupts that kind of training year. And a lot of postdoctoral programs, they're funded by stipends, which are different than kind of salaries. And the institution doesn't have a way of managing that to pay for that leave. I would also add that programs will also maybe allow you to leave annual leave, sick leave, or PPO if it's combined, or they can allow you to, if you need to take some, because clearly delivering a child, you need to take some time off. They can extend the training program in order for you to be able to get kind of the training that was promised. And if you know this is going to affect you, I would reach out to a program ahead of time and ask kind of what their policies are. So, Patty or Heather,
I was
anything
gonna
to
say
add?
the same thing, like people usually use the sick time, vacation time, and then they're really also concerned about you getting the hours necessary, once you come back to be able to finish the required postdoc hours. But yeah, every place is a little bit different. Could all please speak to the significant differences in postdoc salaries available and offered? Can one negotiate? I could take up, there are a lot of differences, this is true, in postdoc salaries. I think the ability to negotiate is probably a little bit more feasible in things like private practices, certain VAs, certain medical settings are pretty much set. And it's something that's been budgeted, years earlier. That doesn't mean that salary can't change, but not usually mid or prior to that. It just takes a lot for those things. It changes slowly, but that's my thought on it. You all.
Yeah, I would echo that from the VA perspective. Those stipends are set by the Office of Academic Affiliations, and it's usually several months or at least maybe a year beforehand. They have over the last, I want to say 3 or 4 years, built in an automatic raise each year of at least 1% to those salaries, but there isn't unfortunately any room for negotiation on that within the VA.
Right. You may be able to negotiate with certain programs is aspects of your training experience, say if you how much research you want to do or training in a specific track or area to kind of tailor it towards your kind of specific needs, but it's not necessarily like a job. And then I also want to take this opportunity, Patty had mentioned with private practice postdocs. I had mentioned the markers of quality training earlier. And this really, where this came out of was this proliferation of private practice postdocs, which has exploded really in the past 3 to 4 years. We also know through surveys of last year that in terms of postdoctoral applicants, where they see themselves working down the road is this is the biggest area where they see themselves wanting to work in the future. And I'm not going to get into whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, but what I will say is some of these private practice postdocs, almost none of them, with some exception, are APIC members or APA accredited. Some of them are probably very good training experiences. I know that many of them are not very good training experiences. And so I would say buyer beware as you're considering these. Think about those quality markers. Think about the things that you can look at on APIC's website, their membership criteria. Does the program offer things like that? Do they give you the flavor that they're offering training rather than employment? And oftentimes what they will do is they may give you a base salary, but then you earn your true salary by your productivity. And that is typically not a training environment. And often there's pressure there to see more and more people. Whereas a postdoctoral training program, the focus really does need to be on training. So if you're considering these things, think about it, interviewing the program, okay? I think there was a question earlier about if you're interviewing virtually, meeting with postdocs, how do you do that, current postdocs? You can ask the program if you could talk to postdocs as part of the application process. Even if it's not part of the formal interview, you could ask to be able to contact them afterwards. If people are not willing to let you do that, I would be suspect. I think that's usually not a very good indicator of a program. So it's part of that like critical information that you really need to determine, is this a quality program? And then is it a program that is a good fit for you as an applicant?
Yeah, that's a good point. And usually like we'll have people meet with a postdoc, but they don't rank or do any kind of evaluation on the applicant so they can kind of have that safe space. Another question, is there a talk like this that's more specific to neuropsych postdoc?
No, and that is unfortunate. And I would say the neuropsych application process is challenging because we mentioned earlier, APSIN or APPCN has a match. Okay, the match is roughly around 65% of all postdoctoral programs. The other 35 or so percent, that's not an exact number, are referred to as kind of independent programs who don't subscribe to the match. You need to decide at a point about which programs you're going to apply to, because if you opt to go into the APSIN match, you then are no longer viable for those independent programs not participating in the match, and vice versa. Once you commit to the match is a binding agreement similar to the match for internship. In fact, it's run by the National Match Service, which is for internship as well also. So with this, I strongly recommend is if you're looking for a neuropsych postdoc, is mentorship from someone at your internship, their faculty, getting clear guidance through that process. At first, I would recommend casting a wider net and maybe not concerning yourself as much with APSIN versus independent programs. And then as you're applying, maybe that becomes clearer which are your preferences and where do you decide down the road. The timelines will help you with that as you do that. And I would say for my co-presenters, anything to add?
Another question, what does exempt research focus mean for the prompt will follow APIC selection standards?
They are exempt from the standards. So they are not required to follow the standards because we realize neuropsych, because of the match, whether you're doing the match or not, would interfere. There's no way that neuropsych programs could be successful following the standards. So they're exempt from that. So, and the same thing from research, because some go very early in the fall. In fact, it's possible that people who are seeking a research postdoc have already accepted that postdoctoral program. And so the exempt is exempt from the standards. And the reason why we use that language is so that it's not considered like a bad thing that that program isn't following the standards. And you don't interpret it as a negative.
Next question, my internship goes through the end of August. Will programs generally be flexible on the start date if their start date is in August? I think it varies by program. Some places are a little bit more flexible than others. The best bet is to directly ask the training director. Sometimes because of certain didactic starting or different orientations, they aren't able to move the start date, but I don't know what feedback you all have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would reach out to the training director. I know for our site, for example, we've been flexible for things like internship end date, parental leave that occurs between internship and the start of postdoc, and other life circumstances. So I think it varies by program. I would ask the training director.
Right, right. And it's my impression that most programs would be flexible around this, but clearly reach out and ask if you're considering applying, because it wouldn't make sense to put work into an application if they're not willing to, if you finish internship too late for that.
How do you know if the program is following the standards?
There is a checkbox indicated in their UPPD listing, and hopefully the program is also advertising this in their website and public materials. And if it's not clear to you, ask the program.
Yeah. How do we know which states require a postdoc? I'm struggling to find the information online. Well, it looks like Heather's about to answer that one.
I was starting to type. Yeah, I would suggest going to the state licensing board's website, and you can access those from the ASPPB website. I've seen circulated on various listservs kind of documents that people have compiled of state licensing requirements. And I think that I've already seen some errors in those documents. So because I think in part they're difficult to maintain and keep updated. So my recommendation is go to ASPPB and then go to the state's, directly to the state's website.
Yep, and your training director or postdoc director should know that information as well.
Let me add to that is on ASPB, and it's asppp.org. And they're like listing around licensure requirements. There's some summary information by states. It's not super comprehensive. They also provide the links to the state statutes. So as like an initial like summary, and I would say what ASPB puts out there is probably fairly reliable rather than these other documents that Heather had noted. And then also, if you have questions, the training director of that postdoctoral program probably has a pretty good knowledge about the licensure requirements in the state. So if you have specific questions.
Definitely. Somebody, for the person who had questions on the neuropsych, they posted a video about more information. So that's available. Somebody wrote, just to confirm, can we apply to postdocs both through the match process and outside? What if we are matched, but our preferred postdoc is outside the match process? Is it still binding?
So I would recommend going to it's APPCN Absence website and reading about the match. There is a date by which you have to withdraw from the match if you're going to accept a program from a non-match independent program. So you can't, so there's a point where you have to make a decision. Are you going to look at independent programs or are you going to look at APPCN programs? And recognize that's difficult, that's stressful. I don't know why they can't, like the neuropsych world can't figure this out, but it's a challenge.
Many programs in South Florida are rumored to only accept Spanish-speaking clinicians. Should we apply if we do not speak Spanish or assume those are out?
I
You
would,
know, I would not rule yourself out prematurely or preemptively. I would reach out to the program directly and find out if you could be considered as a non-Spanish speaking applicant.
right. And chances are, if that's a requirement, the program would indicate that in their materials or requirements. But again, reach out. And again, I wouldn't make any of these assumptions and automatically like not consider a program based on that. Is you could reach out. Training directors are very willing to respond to applicants. Again, this is a buyer's market, and programs are often in competition with each other, so they're going to be willing to do this. The one caveat that I would say is read through the program's materials and make sure if you're asking a question, don't ask something that is readily available, like in bold letters on their website. It maybe won't bode well for you. But if you can't find it, please reach out and ask.
Somebody had a question, what is a reciprocal offer? We're not doing that anymore, but I guess what is it?
The reciprocal offer was with not the selection standards, it's the old selection guidelines, which I think is 4+ years old at this point. And it was this mechanism where if you were made an offer by a program that was not your top ranked program, you could then go to your top ranked program and say, hey, I have a reciprocal, I have an offer. Can you make me an offer? And if you were the top ranked applicant for that program, they would say, yes, we'd love to have you. And then you're done early. And you didn't have to wait until that uniform notification date. So not sure whether that makes sense. The take home is it's not a thing anymore. There is no shortcut to this process. So they will just kind of unfold as you and kind of late January, early February.
Those are all the questions that I currently see on here. I'm not sure if anybody has any. The main thing I would say is there's so many resources out there that people aren't aware of that really make a difference on the APIC website. The communication templates, I think, are a big plus for people to review. I think as a training director, I see somebody using it. It's kind of standard. It can take away the awkwardness of how do I respond? Like it's standard. Everybody's responding the same way. So would definitely read through those. And just again, realize what's out there already. Other stuff to add.
Other questions pending?
Hold on, one more. Is the match only binding for neuropsych postdocs or for all?
The match is only for neuropsych programs that are absent members. Okay, there is no match for clinical programs, research programs. There was a question earlier. I'm going to share my screen and show you something. Patty, was there another question in the meantime?
Not so far.
Okay. All right, so I think I'm sharing my screen.
There was a question earlier, maybe about the 2 years in neuropsych. Did that have to be at the same program? It does not. You want to make good evidence for why you're going to a different place, obviously.
Right. And I will say for that 2-year neuropsych postdoc is most neuropsych postdocs want to become board certified or ABAPT. ABAP is maybe less flexible about breaking up your postdoctoral experience across 2 years. They usually want it to be in a continuous program. I would reach out to ABAP, so the American Board of Neuropsychology, and ask them specifically. There's probably some information on their website, but I wouldn't just assume that completing 2 separate neuro postdocs is going to, it may make it more difficult for you, not impossible, but may make it more difficult. There was a question earlier about salary, and I wanted to show you. So I'm on the APIC website here under About, and then we're going to go to survey results. Hold on, I messed up here. Here we go. So postdoc surveys for last year. And this is like good information that that you can kind of see from last year. But what I wanted to show you is
While you're looking for that, somebody's asking if a posting on the UPPD has not been updated, is it appropriate to reach out to the contact person to ask if this position will be offered? Yes, definitely do that.
yes, we are working hard to get programs to update their listings.
And are APIC members the same as sites following the standards? I mean, yes.
No, not all APIC programs are agreeing to follow the standards. I would say many are. Overall, I ran some numbers yesterday. About 88% of programs now that have been updated are indicating they're following the standards. There's a higher percentage of APIC programs, but they are not. I would say the VA has required all of its programs to follow the standards. All right, I'm looking a little silly that I can't find this so easily. There we go. So program stipends. There's a lot of maybe misinformation about stipends and stipends being ridiculously low. But this is the data we collected last year. And kind of modal is between 50 and 59. And clearly there are some that are higher. Some of these much higher ones are private practice, and some are like military settings, which induct you as an officer. And so they're paying you as an officer rather than just kind of a postdoc. But kind of be aware this is kind of where the range is, and it may vary. And also within the ranges, consider what the non-salary benefits might be as well that make that kind of an attractive program for you. And then I was also going to, so here, like I'm on the APIC site, and here you can see the top postdoc. If you just click here, go to the Universal Postdoctoral Directory, and say, I'm located in Minnesota, and I want to look at programs in Minnesota. We just scroll down here, Minnesota, and then say agency type. I'm exclusively looking at, let's say, VA medical centers, and click search. This will happen because it's a narrow field. It came up really quickly. And yeah, these are all the Minneapolis programs. And then this is just kind of a summary of information. And then if you want more detailed information, this one gives a much more detailed information per program, including the website link, descriptions, etc. And you can search by just about any criteria that you want. I would caution people to, here we go. The free text fields can work, but it's not exhaustive. So I wouldn't like assume if you're typing in Minneapolis VA into that it's going to automatically bring up every listing. And so I would recommend searching by different criteria. Okay. And if you have challenges or whatever, reach out to us with it. We'll be happy to help.
No more questions.
All right. Heather, Patty, any last minute things that we did not cover that you feel are important?
No.
Not that I can think of.
All right.
Yeah, thank you all for participating and all the questions. Hopefully this has been helpful, help clarify different things. And I said a lot of information on the website. And the link to the webinar recording will be out in a couple of days.